Hi, welcome to the bathtub. This is Scott Bradfield and the Reading Great Books in the Bathtub, and this is our special pre-Thanksgiving edition of the bathtub. We've also the other celebratory moment. We have lots of celebrations in the bathtub. The other one is this is going to be one of these kind of intersecting bathtub lectures, talks, and it's kind of it's mixed up with a my ultimate beginners creative writing course this term, where we're talking about a writer who I've always liked, called name's Jane Gardam. You may not know her. She's a British novelist, and when I moved to England in the mid '80s, or started spending most of my kind of professional life there, um, I I often noticed that there are all the trendy people, the Martin Amises and the Salman Rushdie types, who were very big in the late '80s and for many years after. All often you sit around spoke with disdain about they used to call them the British lady novelists, and they're always saying, no, we're not doing the British lady novelist thing. We're writing these big world encompassing novels that are about politics and the universe and everything. And I have to say, most of the writers who said stuff like that I didn't like. I can't stand Amos's novels, and Rushdie I can kind of live without. But it set me to read some of the lady novelists. One of my favorite writers we'll talk about soon, I'm sure, is Iris Murdoch. And many of the British lady novelists were 10 times better than Martin Amis. That was my personal experience. And I haven't read a lot of Jane Gardam, but I read many of her stories. I read another novel of hers years ago, and I picked this one out for my class simply because she was this sort of writer who's always been on my radar. I've always really liked what I read of hers. And once at a dinner, on one of the rare times I ever sat down and met some actual writers in England, she sat next to me at this kind of dinner party, and she was a lovely lady, and I really liked her, and I I was really glad to do this book. I haven't read it before. It was a very good bathtub read, and it's called The Queen of the Tambourine. It's about kind of midway in Gardam's career. She subsequently wrote a book called Old Filth, which I haven't read, and several books that did very well. She's kind of best known for. And I'm sure she must have been in her late 50s or 60s when she wrote this one. Um, I don't want to talk too much about it, except that I picked it for my class not simply because I liked her work and I had not read the book. I like to teach books I haven't read before, um, but it was an epistolary novel, so it's told as a series of letters, and it starts off with a great. I'm a big fan of the epistolary novel. I like writing them, and I like reading them, and that they're wonderful as a writer because you can just skip all the bullshit and all the crap, and you get bored with a scene or a section of the story, and you just say goodbye, and then you start the next one as soon as the next interesting thing happens. You say, oh, you can just skip every single unimportant part of the story and just get right to the next exciting part. And she does this really well in the opening chapters. It starts off as a letter to a woman in her village. It's a very claustrophobic. Uh, was it? Is it West London? It's no. It's South London, I guess. Rathbone Road, and where the kind of middle class families live. And she's writing a letter to this woman who's run away from her husband, named Joan. And the whole first 30 or 40 pages is just a tour de force. Gardam's a great short story writer. I mean, I love her short stories, and I haven't read them in a long time, but they're very good. And this is kind of the first 30 or 40 pages, like a great short story of this writing to this woman who never comes into the story at all. But we're just hearing about this kind of woman who's just got sick of being a middle class woman and just ran off, and she's traveling all over the world. And the narrator of this novel is sending these letters to, I don't know, I can't remember, Jakarta or wherever the hell this woman's showing up, Egypt somewhere. And so she's writing all these places that this woman Joan said she would go to, and in the interstices of these letters to this woman who's apparently having a great life, things start to happen. This woman Joan sends some guy to her house, and she sends a couple of guys actually to the house, and this kind of fabulous world outside of her small claustrophobic villagey section of London, where everybody knows each other and is always looking at each other, is kind of opening her up. And then, in a weird way in the book, it sort of changes. The whole book shifts a bit. And so all this kind of epistolary bang, bang, bang of the story and kind of the funness and the good. And again, Gardam writes lovely scenes, great narrative scenes. It starts to slow down. It's a very strange shift in this book. It slows down to a much more introspective piece about this woman living in this claustrophobic village, and these little stories and these little vignettes, most of which are great. These little vignettes about things that have happened in her life since she's come to live on Rathbone Road with her husband, and they're kind of a childless couple, and they're kind of and so we have a lot of backstory, which she's not bothering us with, and we're moving straight forward. And so we get these little episodes, and her husband leaves her, and she's left by herself. And so this introspective novel takes over, and it's not bad. It's quite good, and she writes very well. It loses this great energy and flair of the opening 40 pages, and the whole novel, to my mind, gets a little too clever by the time we get to the end. It kind of gets tied up in a very kind of clever bow at the end, but I still enjoyed it, and I love Gardam's vision of people. It's a certain type of thing you do get in this sort of class of women novelists who kind of are always watching people and watching their reactions to things. There's a great funny passage where she's often talking to the neighbors because she's basically going a little mad. And there's a few passages where she's going mad and things happen very quickly, and the way she recalls them, they're done really well. But some of the best parts are her going around talking to her neighbors and hearing these stories. And one of her neighbors is a novelist, and she goes to America to meet her editor, about 178. I'm not going to read it, but there's a lovely, funny scene where she goes back to America. This friend of hers goes to America to meet her editor, and she goes to some restaurant and sits around in the restaurant and waits and waits and waits. And then the editor this is such a perfect picture of New York publishing. This woman's kind of excited, she's going to meet her editor. And the editor forgets. This English woman calls her editor in New York, who's supposed to be some big shot. I met a bunch of these people. And she calls the woman in her office. And she can tell on the other end of the line the woman's eating. The woman's completely forgotten this lunch because she's the novel isn't selling. And she goes to meet her finally. She goes to the office like the next day or something. And there's this really uncomfortable scene where I will read this little passage. She says 178, the author's so defensive, and she says, and the editor says, "I'm sorry to have to say this," she said, "but the book isn't going too well. The trouble with us Americans is that we're just not eggheads." Because the book is kind of well written. And it's kind of subtle. So she disparages the Americans as not being eggheads, but of course she's saying you guys are just too smarty pants for us. And so the narrator, or the woman, the neighbors, who's the author, says, "I said, but it's only about love. You liked the book. You bought the book." And the editor says, "Well," she said, "I didn't exactly buy it. Someone else did, and she's left. She was the house drunk." Matter of fact, I haven't exactly read it yet. "Say," she said, "do you have a cat? I'm a cat lover. Do you ever think of writing a book about a cat?" I met these people. I live with my cat, and you know what? I don't seem able to feel for anything like I feel for my cat. Not even for Central American politics, which is my area. Sorry. That's what that whole scene, it goes on for a few pages. It's so hilarious. And it's only like 4 pages about American publishing told through the eyes of the neighbor of the woman telling the story. And it's hilarious. And there's lots of lovely set pieces like this. And it's sort of best read as a kind of a series of stories. So I don't want to say too much more. Again, it's a certain class. It's a certain claustrophobic class. It's a certain area of England which is kind of foreign to Americans. particularly the people who live in these areas together for years and years and years, and they all know what each other's doing, but they don't really correspond as people. And then in the middle of it, this kind of effusive fascination of the narrator with this woman who's run off and left it all behind. And it's a lovely book. It's very funny, and I really wish she had kind of gone somewhere besides where she goes with the book. That was my feeling. But I will definitely keep reading Jane Gardam. Real different writer for us Americans' perspectives, and even though we're not eggheads, we could probably you could probably enjoy this book. It's a great funny book. So anyway, I thought I picked something a little different this week, just for something we haven't read before, and we'll talk to you after Thanksgiving, and try to find some time for the bathtub, even though your family's around. If the family starts driving you crazy, the best place to go is always the bathtub. Okay, get a book, go in the bathtub. No one will even know you're gone. If there's 2 bathrooms in the house, no one will know you're gone. Okay, we'll see you soon. Bye.